It is Monday, May 12th, and huge news. President Donald J. Trump making history, announcing MFN pricing for all prescription drugs, something no other president, no other politician ever had the backbone, the willingness, the stomach to do. All the Dems who claim they want socialized medicine, they didn't do this. Donald Trump did. This means the price of all prescription drugs will be slashed on average 59%, effective immediately. Also, the latest on Trump's China trade deal, the big reciprocal tariffs falling way down, and more stories as well from around the country. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So after decades of Dem politicians and presidents claiming they want socialized healthcare, they want the government to lower drug prices, help pay for our healthcare. Politicians like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders spending their careers campaigning on these issues. Two Democrat presidents in the last 17 years with full control of the House and the Senate, and never, not once, have they done what Donald Trump did this morning, teasing the order out last night on Truth Social, saying for many years the world's wondered why prescription drugs and pharmaceuticals in the U.S. were so much higher in price than they were in any other nation, sometimes being 5 to 10 times more expensive. It was always difficult to explain and very embarrassing because, in fact, there was no correct or rightful answer. The pharma companies would say it was R&D costs alone. Campaign contributions can do wonders, but not with me and not with the Republican Party. We are going to do the right thing, something that Dems have fought for many years to prevent. Therefore, I am pleased to announce that tomorrow morning I will be signing one of the most consequential executive orders in our country's history, and he's done it. Effective immediately, drug prices in this country will be slashed by an average of 59%. Trump and RFK Jr. holding a signing ceremony at the White House to announce this and sign a most favored nation pricing policy for prescription drugs, something the pharma lobby has successfully prevented for decades until now. Trump telling a story this morning at this presser about how bad a problem this really is, telling it in pure Trumpian fashion. This is great. Watch.
I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up, and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88, and in New York I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on?
RFK Jr. almost being brought to tears when speaking during this announcement, saying Donald Trump, first president who has the intestinal fortitude to stand up to Big Pharma, that every Democrat, every single one, promises to do this, but is successfully paid off by the lobbyists until Donald Trump. Watch.
To be a part of it, and I'd like to ask Robert F. Kennedy to say a few words, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry, There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator in Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself, spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry, too. I think they gave you $100 million. Yeah. But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on this side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people. We have 4.2% of the world's population. Our country represents 75% of the revenues for pharmaceutical companies. We spend in our country $1,126 per capita on drugs. In Britain, they spend about $240. They spend 1/5 of what we do. And this is true across Europe. And the drug companies, Europeans, if you ask them, it made no sense what they were saying. America has to pay for this innovation or it's not going to happen. What President Trump is saying to our European partners is you've got to raise the amount that you're paying for those drugs and pay for your share of the innovation. That the United States is no longer subsidizing that. If the Europeans raise the price of their drugs by just 20%, that is $10 trillion. That can be spent on innovation, and the health of all people all across the globe is going to increase because we're going to have better products. So I'm just so grateful to be here today. I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime. I have a couple of kids who are Democrats, are big Bernie Sanders fans, and when I told them that this was going to happen, they had tears in their eyes because they thought this is never going to happen in our lifetime, and we finally have a president who's willing to stand up for the American people.
If you ask any healthcare policy-oriented voter who gets into the weeds of healthcare policy, ask them how big a deal this is. This is what Bernie Sanders campaigned on, what Obama originally promised, what every Dem promises on the campaign trail, but never delivers. Most favored nation pricing means HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, RFK's department, will set prices for prescription drugs to match the lowest rates in comparable nations. So all the drugs where Europeans, for example, pay 30 to 80% less than Americans, effective immediately, this order sets the max cap drug makers can charge us. If they charge Germans $20 for a box of insulin, they can't charge us, Americans, $200 for the same freaking box. Trump administration setting a cap, doing so by finding the cheapest price that drug maker charges in a similar country. And what's crazy about this is that Trump tried doing this at the end of his first term, but guess what happened? The Biden administration rescinded the order. The original proposal was projected to save Americans $85 billion over 7 years, but it never took effect, thanks to Democrats. Ask yourself why that is. Either because they work for the pharmaceutical lobby or they want this as a campaign running issue, or both, maybe, probably both. Trump posting on Truth Social this morning, drug prices to be cut by 59% plus. Gasoline, energy, groceries, and all other costs down. No inflation. Love, Donald J. Trump. Thank you, President Trump. In another story, the U.S. and China reaching an agreement to lower the reciprocal tariffs. President Trump telling reporters that trade negotiations have led to a total reset in U.S.-China relations. Roll the tape.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the largest structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs.
The deal lowering the 145% reciprocal tariffs down to 10% for 90 days while trade negotiations continue. This does not include removing the universal tariffs on cars, steel, and aluminum. Those tariffs, they stay in place and likely will permanently. The primary things that we're asking for, the primary asks the U.S. side's looking for, include China boosting consumption, meaning transitioning them from being a purely export-based economy to a more balanced export-import economy. Also stopping the illegal devaluing of the yuan when trading in dollars, and a crackdown on black market fentanyl production. Markets took the developments positively. U.S. government bonds selling off this morning as investors rotating back into equities and other risk-sensitive assets. The S&P gaining 3%, the NASDAQ up 3.5%, the Dow breaking 1,000 points midday. In another story, President Trump announcing this morning he will be granting 49 white South African farmers asylum in the United States, fast-tracking their citizenship. They're being persecuted by their government, their land confiscated, at risk of being killed because of the crazy racist rhetoric coming out of the economic freedom fighters down there, something the media refuses to report on. Bottom line, you do not want to be a white landowner in South Africa, especially after the Expropriation Act of 2024, the bill signed into law this year in South Africa, which grants their government the legal right to confiscate private property to help heal historical disparities caused by colonialism. Sounds like something AOC and the squad would think up in this country, doesn't it? Trump gladly taking on this issue, letting it be known racism of any kind against any group is wrong and won't be tolerated by the United States. Watch.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here.
Dems and their henchmen in the media, of course, spinning this into Trump dog whistling to racists. Senator Chris Van Hollen, the same guy who spent our tax dollars flying to El Salvador last month to try and bring an illegal alien terror suspect back to this country, he's at it again. This time accusing the Trump administration of enacting a global apartheid policy by granting these 49 white South Africans refugee status. You can't make this up. Watch.
To watch the Trump administration apply what I call their global apartheid policy by providing sort of asylum or refugee status to some Afrikaners, white South Africans, while they shut everybody else out, is just an outrageous insult to the whole idea of our country and the whole idea of Dr. King, that at the end of the day, it's character that counts. We have to call it out for what it is. It's an application of a global apartheid policy by the Trump administration.
The difference, Chris, is this is the point of asylum. This is the reason to grant somebody asylum if they're facing real persecution, not like what the Biden administration did by granting millions of illegals asylum just to get them into the country and keep them here. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.